Lectures on the Basics of Biblical Greek. Chapters 1 to 3. The Greek Language and Alphabet. This lecture has 4 parts. First of all, I'll place Koine Greek, the Greek of the New Testament, in the context of ancient Greek language as a whole. Then, I'll offer a few words about learning Greek before we turn to the work of the day, which is mastering the Greek alphabet and how to write the lowercase letters. You are taking this course because you wish to learn the basics of Biblical Greek. Biblical Greek is called Koine, or Common Greek, but where does that fit in the history of the language? The earliest forms of ancient Greek originated probably about 1300 years before Jesus. One of those forms, the most well-known, is Linear B. As languages do, over time, the language evolves, drawing on neighboring units, and in the 8th century to BC to the 4th century BC, we have what is typically known as Classical Greek. It's a marvelous, intricate language with a lot of nuance. However, when Alexander the Great left from Macedonia and conquered not only the Eastern Mediterranean, but as far as India, he brought with him the Greek language in a form called Koine, or Common Greek. And so by the time of Jesus, this was everybody's second language. It was the language of culture and of commerce, a universal language, somewhat like English is today. But Koine Greek is simplified from Classical Greek, and a number of the subtleties of Classical Greek are disappearing. It was the common, everyday form of Greek, the one that God chose to be the language of the New Testament, and through that New Testament to preserve the gospel to this day. The goal of this class is to learn the basics of Biblical Greek. And so this class will keep focus specifically on that goal. We're not going to teach you everything about Koine Greek. We're just going to teach the basics, enough so that you can function with the words of the New Testament in their original language. That's going to require a degree of memorization. You can't learn Greek without memorization and the practice that involves. In this class, we're going to use a particular form of teaching called flipped education. I'm not going to spend time in class lecturing you. Rather, you will get the lectures in advance. And so, for each new topic, you'll read the textbook, watch the lecture, and then post a question prior to coming to class. That way we can maximize our time in class working on the challenging parts of the day's lesson. To be successful at Biblical Greek requires a degree of consistency and discipline. I strongly suggest that you set out a regular time each day, even though we only meet 3 times a week, but each day to work on Greek. It's not something you can cram just before a test. And the other thing I recommend is that you work with a partner or a group of partners. When doing so, you tend to encourage one another, help one another, and learn more by learning together. So let's begin. Koine Greek uses an alphabet that has some similarities to the English alphabet you know well, but also some characters that are different. The first two letters of the Greek alphabet are alpha and beta, so now you know where the word alphabet comes from. The last letter of the Greek alphabet is omega. So when the New Testament in the book of Revelation says that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, you now know that has its origin in the Greek alphabet. I suggest you start learning the Greek alphabet by simply pronouncing over and over in order the letters of the Greek alphabet. Let's do that now. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. Notice we're pronouncing the I as a long E. The enunciation system we're going to use in this class is an artificial one that comes out of the Renaissance. We really don't know what ancient Greek sounded like, and modern Greek is likely different from it. Nonetheless, begin to learn that the I sound is actually a long E. So let's pronounce the words together again, but this time a little faster. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. In the chart, you notice that the larger black letters, those are the uppercase versions of each of the Greek letters, and the blue letters are the lowercase versions. Now go to the end of the third row and look at the sigma. There are two sigmas. The first sigma, the one that looks like a circle with a little tail, is called medial sigma. Whenever sigma shows up in a word, other than when it's in the last position, it takes on this form. So if it's the initial consonant, it's this form. If it's somewhere in the middle of the word, it's this form. But if sigma is the last letter of a word, it takes on the final form that looks like a C with a little tail below it. So there are two lowercase sigmas. Now let's work on forming each of the Greek letters. I suggest that you turn to page 1 in your workbook, because after I describe a letter, the slideshow will pause, giving you the opportunity to practice the letter in the workbook before going on to the next letter. The alpha gives us the A sound in Greek. The most common form is that on the left, which looks like a fish. It sits in the lower half of the line's registry, starting at the middle of the registry, swooping down, around, up, and then across and down again. Practice that form several times, and then continue the video. The beta looks like a B, although it has a tail descending below the line. You can form it with two strokes, as on the left, and as people typically form English Bs. I prefer the form on the right, which is made with one stroke starting below the line, ascending to the top of the line, swooping in to make the first loop, and then swooping out and in to make the second loop. practice writing beta. To form the gamma, you start at the middle of the line, swoop down below the line forming a loop, and then back up to the middle of the line. It's typical to have a relatively small loop, although some people have larger loops. But that's the form of gamma. Practice writing it several times before you continue this presentation. The delta looks something like a musical note. It is formed by starting in the middle of the line, forming the lower circle, then ascending to the top of the line, ending to the right side of the letter. Oftentimes when writing quickly, the sharp angle disappears and becomes a curve. Practice writing a delta several times before you continue. The epsilon looks like a backwards 3, but it sits in the lower half of the registry of the line. Starting in a midpoint, 2 swoops makes an epsilon. Practice that one now. The zeta starts above the middle part of the line. Some people started at the top of the line with a loop and then drawing to the right side of the letter, swooping down and making a sort of flat S shape, ending either at the bottom of the line or slightly below the line. There are a couple of letters in Greek that are very confusing for beginning students because they look just like a different letter in English. The eta is an example. It looks like an N, but it's not. It's a long EY or AY sound, eta. One starts at the middle of the line, making a stroke to the bottom, and then a hump like forming an N, often ending slightly below the line. This letter is eta. It's a long vowel. Practice it several times. The theta gives us the th sound in Greek, although unlike 2 letters in English, it's 1 letter in Greek. It's a tall, narrow oval with a line through it. Many people form it with 2 strokes. I use the form on the right, where one makes the tall, narrow oval and then swoops to make the crossbar at the same time in 1 stroke. It's a little faster to write. Practice this letter a couple of times. The iota looks like the I in English with a little tail. Please note, in Greek, one does not dot their I's. That's one that beginning students often make a mistake on until they learn. Practice writing iota, this half-sized letter. The kappa, in its primary form on the left, looks like a K in English, except it sits in the lower half of the registry of the line. Some people form the kappa looking a bit like a U on the right, but that form is quite rare. You should practice the first form, a K, but all kept in the lower half of the line. The lambda is the L sound in Greek. It's a full-sized letter, starting with a downward stroke from the upper part of the registry, and then a little tent to the left from the middle part of the registry. Practice writing a lambda several times. The next 2 letters are a bit confusing. The mu looks like a U, but it's not. It carries the M sound. You can make it with 2 strokes, as in this example. one line starting at the middle and descending below the base, and then a U with a extra leg. Or you can start below the base, stroke up, then do the U with the tail. It's up to you. But this is not a U. It's an M sound. Mu. Practice it a few times. The nu looks like a V, but it's not a V. It's an N sound. And it can be made either with all sharp edges, as on the right, or with a curved stroke and a sharp edge, as on the left. Practice writing the nu that looks like a V. After a couple of letters that make sounds that are different from their English equivalents, we come to the Greek letter xi. There's nothing like this in English. It's basically a backwards 3, full-size letter with a tail on each end. Some people form the lower tail going below the bottom of the line. It's just a full-size squiggle. Practice writing the xi several times before you continue. This letter is easy. It's the omicron. It's a lowercase o. But it's always the short o. It's never pronounced o. Always o. Omicron. Practice this simple circle several times. You may know this letter already from your math classes, where it's called pi. More precisely, it's used in geometry as one works with circles. However, we will call it p. It's formed by drawing a horizontal line at the middle of the registry for the letter and two vertical lines from the middle to the bottom of the registry. Here we have another letter that can be confusing because it's not a P with a P sound. It's the rho. It conveys the R sound. There are two ways to form this circle with a descending line, either with two strokes, as is demonstrated here, a circle and then a separate line descending, or one may make one stroke starting from the bottom, from below the line, up and around. That's how I form the rho. Practice it a couple of times. The medial sigma is the form of the sigma or S sound that occurs everywhere in the letter, or everywhere in the word, except when it occurs at the end of the word. It's simple to form a circle with a horizontal tail. Practice it a few times. The final sigma, that is the sigma that comes at the end of the word, looks somewhat like an S, although if you look at your textbook, the form is more like a C with a tail below it. I think the textbook's version is a little bit better because in Greek inscriptions, the sigma is a C. Practice the sigma several times. The tau is the Greek T. It's formed with two strokes. Notice the vertical stroke does not go above the horizontal stroke, and the letter is entirely in the lower half of the registry. Some people, when writing cursive Greek, form the tau by drawing a straight horizontal line and then a C. We're going to focus on the left form for our work. Practice it a couple of times. And make sure your vertical bar does not break and go above the horizontal one. The upsilon looks like a U in English, except there's no right-hand bar. Practice forming the upsilon a few times. Be sure to keep the bottom of the letter curved lest you confuse it with the nu, which is not a V. Practice, practice, practice. The phi gives us the PH sound in Greek. It can be formed by making a circle in the lower half of the registry with a vertical line through it, or one can make a single stroke as on the right. Either form is okay. Practice it a couple of times. The key gives us a hard CH sound, not an X sound, although it looks like an X, most often formed as on the left with two strokes in the lower half of the registry and going below the line. Again, this is not a full-size letter, but one that is in the lower half of the registry but extends below the bottom of the line. Some people writing cursive Greek use two strokes as on the right. I encourage you to practice the key on the left. The psi gives us a PS sound. It's formed by writing an upsilon and then drawing a vertical line through it. Practice the psi a bit. The last letter of the Greek alphabet is the omega. It gives us a long O sound. Even though it looks like a W, it's a long O sound. Practice it a couple of times. And keep the bottoms of each section curved, not sharp as the W is in English. These are the letters of the Greek alphabet. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. You must master the alphabet before you can learn any Greek. So, practice some more. In this lesson, we've placed the Koine Greek of the New Testament in the context of ancient Greek development. We've talked a bit about learning Greek, how practice and persistence are important, and how working with a partner is advantageous. The rest of this lesson has been about the Greek alphabet, mastering the 24 letters and learning to write the lowercase Greek letters.